Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about the changes that we've been going through at Intercom, but more generally the changes the entire industry has been going through. And to do this, I'll start off with kind of a shocking quote, which is from Dennis Hamadis from DeepMind, who basically said that agents themselves are probably the single biggest technology that's ever going to happen. I think that's basically true. He's not the only person who said it. Pretty much everyone who's ever in technology has said some version of agents are going to be big. And my version of this quote is to basically say, can we all just chill and say something actually useful? Because I'm kind of sick of all the just pointless hype speak. And I think it's more useful to actually say something practical or tactical that you can actually go and apply. And this is very much, if you have a B2B SaaS business like we did with Intercom, this is very much an adapt or die moment. Agents will destroy your business. You will have no alternative. You will die unless you actually survive in this new era of AI. And I really believe that this is not an if it'll happen, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon, and it's going to happen to you. There are no exceptions. And the Thanos version of this, if you like the Avengers, is that you can dread it or run from it, but it is coming for you no matter what. So when I talked internally about this with Intercom and I said, hey, here's our options, I sort of said, hey guys, good news. If we do this right, we will be an extremely massive company that will take over the future of customer service. Because obviously, to zoom out for a second, when we all saw ChatGPT for the first time, it was incredibly obvious that customer service would never be the same again. It was quite clearly in the kill zone of AI. The idea that agents can go and consume information and answer any question you might ever have. And the question was simply, could we build that product or will we be killed by that product? There's no in between. So the hype sort of speech I gave internally was, if we do this well, we'll be a huge company. Also, if we don't, we'll all be dead within about 2 years. Thankfully, we survived. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. Practically speaking, sitting here in July 2025, what everyone needs to get incredibly good at is building the best agent that can do the job your product does. That's literally the challenge you have. And the person who does it the best will probably win the category. There might be multiple winners if there's no network effects. But in general, this is happening very fast. So I've kind of broken the game plan into 5 steps. We are basically going to ask, how ambitious can we be with our agent? What specific job will the agent do or jobs will the agent do? What are the trade-offs we have to make? The most common trade-off you'll see in AI is reliability, predictability, trust, and control versus coverage. How much will it do? How much will it get right? Then we'll talk about agent architecture, the choices you have to make there. And lastly, we'll just talk about what it actually looks like to make this happen. So starting in the category of ambition, the big question you have to ask yourself is, I'm sorry, there's so much furniture in the way here. The least ambitious thing you can do is augment a human doing something they were already doing, all right? That's what we call a co-pilot type product. It will work, it will speed people up, but it is not transformative, it is just an efficiency boost. A slightly more efficient thing you can do is you can say we're going to tackle an entire workflow. So we're going to take a chunk of somebody's job away. Not all of it, but we're going to do certain things. And then the real ambition is when you say we are going to build an agent that does the work of the entire organization. We are going to do all support or all marketing copy or all payments, whatever it is your business does. And that's the sort of most ambitious. But it is worth saying that your risk and your ambition tend to go together. It's very, very easy to build something low and left. It's very, very hard to build something high and to the right. And the risk and the reward flow together here in this example. A lot of the time, you're going to have to ask yourself, how much software do we want to build? And what that looks like is, and I see this all the time, so I've invested in maybe 100 startups, but since the AI wave, I've probably invested in 50 or so, who all grapple with this question. They started out doing a cool meeting notes app, but then they're like, now we're going to run the meetings, and now we're going to schedule the follow-ups, and now we're going to read your email, and now we're going to go and do the follow-ups. And I'm like, okay, chill. We have to build something that works, remember? So when you take, say, where do you draw the line for meeting agent? Do you schedule the meeting, share the agenda, meet over VC, record, allocate, track progress, follow-up check-ins? These are all things you can do, but the more you do, the harder it gets. And the more other products you're going to be bumping into as a core competitor. So you really have to right-size your ambition here to say, how much can we do while still being an easy product to adopt? And the other challenge here is that all these products are already competing with each other. Like every single one of these guys is trying to expand their worldview as well. So you have this real challenge where you have to ask yourself, where do I draw the line? Where does my product stop and where should it start in a workflow? And there's this idea that people talk about, which is AI is what they call a convergent force, and that means it just brings things together, right? And your Docs product is also going to be your project management app, etc. Or like your meeting note taker is also going to be your tasks manager or something like that. And it's this idea of convergence, and I think AI makes it possible because historically we used to have different UIs for different user interfaces for different people because all the products were different. But now, when the most common interface we see in AI is just a text input box, all of a sudden there's no reason why you can't do everything. There's no reason why you need a bespoke UI to say, set an alarm, schedule a meeting, take the notes. It's all the same input. So Apple have always talked about this problem with convergence, which is that it makes shit products, but you can get quite excited about them. So Tim Cook had this phrase, which is that you can converge a toaster and a refrigerator because they're both kitchen devices that use electricity, but nobody actually wants a fridge that makes toast. And Steve Jobs said something similar. He said, like, convergence means your television's going to make toast. I don't know why Apple people talk about toast, but like the idea is like just because two products have a lot in common, it does not mean you should always merge them. So you have this challenge, which is like, where does your agent stop and where are you comfortable handing over to people? And the things I think that matter in this case are, if you have a different buyer or a different owner, that's a good time to stop because it's hard to get buy-in from two different buyers. If you have different levels of data integration or different permissioning, that's a good time to stop your product because, again, all of a sudden installation gets a lot harder. Or if you have a entirely different brand. So a lot of people try to be like, we're like a marketing and a support and a sales product. And you don't realize the brands that resonate with salespeople are very different than what resonate with success or support people. So you really have to be careful there. Or if you're just bumping into a great product. Like, just because you're doing tasks, you shouldn't accidentally start competing with Slack. People like Slack-ish, and so you don't actually want to kind of fight with them all the time. So that's the first section, is just understand how ambitious you want to be when you're building this agent. The next is you have to know the job you're trying to copy. If you're trying to replicate a human doing a job, you have to understand that job and not underestimate it. Now, here's the thing that we see a lot, right? A lot of people in the last 2 years have entered the customer service world, and they've said, oh, how hard can it be, right? Customer service is really easy. The customer tells you the problem, and you give them the answer. Duh. And in general, it's actually way harder, right? One of my favorite quotes on this is by Mark Twain, who says, it's not what you know, it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's the things you think you know that you haven't a clue about at all. So here's a very common thing. This is what people who build customer service software think customer service looks like. They think you get well-written, polite, well-formed queries from real people who give you all the information up front. When you actually look at customer service, what you get is stuff like, and by the way, because it's so well-formed, you can immediately identify the task, the intention, the tone, all that sort of stuff. Actual customer service looks like this, right? This is the majority of what you actually deal with in the CS landscape. It's messy. And you have to, first of all, deal with, is this an answerable question? Is it the right question? Should I be answering this question? Who is this user? This is all before you can go and do your fancy RAG lookup or whatever it is. So the other side of this is, oh, don't worry, we're just going to inherit all the docs and all the policies. And I think people say that because they have it in their head, some fantasy that every business has this like beautiful, like, here's all of our policies and all of our plans. In practice, when you go to visit anyone who works in customer support, they have a post-it on their monitor that says something like, Dave will know, he's good for the answer to that question. Like, customer service is an extremely messy space. And I think if you start designing assuming it's an extremely easy space, you're going to produce a beautiful product for a world that doesn't exist. And that happens a lot. Like, what does the CS job actually look like? You have to chat back and forth to work out what the issue is. You have to then find the right abstract version of the issue. You have to sympathize if that's appropriate or empathize. You have to ask clarifying questions, disambiguation. All of that just to get to do a lookup to work out if you know the answer, and then present the answer and go again and make sure you answered it. And as a result, when if we show you the architecture of what we ended up building, it's not a simple ragbot. It's not a thin wrapper, which is the thing that the VCs would say. This is like a look at what the actual architecture of how you answer a CS product, how you answer a CS question, a customer service question. Every single one of these is a bespoke call to a bespoke LLM, either ours or Anthropic or Claude or ChatGPT or whatever. And every single one of them is handcrafted specific to that job. And people think this is easy, and it's really, really not. But I really encourage you to embrace the messiness, because that's actually what makes your product good. And then the other thing you have to understand is, why will AI work now when most of the fields we've been in have had terrible AI products for 10 or 15 years? So why will it work now? And you can learn a lot from what went wrong before. If we look at, like, say, previous AI customer service, why did it fail? It failed because you asked the customer to do a shitload of training at the very start. No one wanted to do it. It failed because the chatbots could not have conversations. They just weren't good enough at what we would call phatic replies, the sort of hi, how are you type stuff. It failed because of structured data. We never had structured data, and that's what the old technologies needed. Now, what does the failure look like? Well, we've all seen these things. Like, this is like the sort of if you wanted to change your mind halfway through a flow. Let's say you say, hey, I'd like to book a hotel room for the 7th. Oh no, I meant the 8th. The chatbot dies. It doesn't have a clue how to replicate that. That was one problem we had, right? And people had to build, this is all technology from yesteryear. People would build all these conversational mapping. And then on the fancy replies, like, in this case here, Brady says, I got scammed. And PayPal says, great. And like, why does it do that? It does that because someone has hard-coded, no matter what the user says, be nice, or something like that. So, and we see these problems all the time. You just see, like, or in this case, somebody's like saying, hi, Murphy, and the Murphy bot says, I don't understand the word hi, perhaps you could say hello. And like, this is just old, this is the problem that we're coming from. So the question you have to ask yourself is, does AI fix all this? And generally speaking, it does, right? But you have to make sure that there's a reason why your product is going to work today if it didn't work 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And just make sure that that reason can be found in generative AI. Otherwise, you're just going to make the exact same mistakes with fancier chatbots. The third thing you should think about is trading off. So generally speaking, you can be agentic, meaning do whatever you want, or you can be predictable. That's the trade-off, right? And what that looks like is, if you want controllable, measurable, or predictable, you generally want to go with this deterministic old-school flowchart. That's not very powerful. If you want something to be easy to use and easy to maintain and very adaptive, you want to go with generative AI. That's not very controllable. You don't know what the generative AI is or isn't going to do. That's kind of the point almost. So you really have to push yourself to see, is there a way we can offer the upside of generative AI, the chattiness, the back and forth, the probabilistic behavior, while also having some guardrails so that it won't go and, like, give 1,000 refunds overnight, or like we've seen examples where it's sold a first-class ticket for $1, or things like that, right? There's so many ways where these agents can go rogue, and everyone's like, well, I wanted to go a little bit rogue, just not that rogue, and that's the sort of challenge you'll always have. So there's this trade-off, and we write about this a lot. If you're curious about it, we publish a lot of research on exactly what this is about, and it's at our research blog, which is Fin.ai/research. But there's this trade-off of agency, which is the agent being able to independently deal with new scenarios perfectly, control, which is the business's ability to guardrail that, and reliability, which is, will it do the same thing in the same scenario multiple times, or will it just kind of make it up each time? And you have to understand that this is a very difficult trade-off to make. And the trade-off you'll make in banking is very different from what you'd make in, say, creativity or picture generation, which is very different from what you'd make in, say, customer service. You have to work out what's right for you. Now, it is worth saying, this idea of agency, control, and reliability, we talk about these things like they're new problems. Humans can be incredibly low agency. We've all worked with people like this. Humans can be incredibly unreliable. One day they're brilliant, one day they're a nightmare, right? That's a human trait too. And humans can be incredibly hard to control, where some days they're a genius and some days they do whatever they want and they break all the laws. These are human challenges too, We often like to talk about them like the AI has presented as a new challenge. But believe me, humans are incredibly hard to work with as well. One thing you should realize, and this is both related to how big your product gets, but also how much you kind of want to be controllable and reliable, is you have to think about the accuracy. So if detecting the new expense in a hypothetical expense tracking app is 99% reliable, you might be like, perfect, that's good enough. And then if finding the category is 98% and say detecting an overspend, if the probability of all of these is at a minimum 95%, but mostly 98, 99%, you might think this is bulletproof, right? But when you daisy chain all of these steps together and you multiply all of that unreliability, you get to a flow that's 85% reliable. And that starts to become a problem for an accountant who's trying to agentify their expense tracking. So you really need to think about how much you can push yourself to be extremely reliable, because your product only exists if it can be used and trusted. And there's a whole domain of areas where, like, if checking the work is as much difficulty as doing the work, then why would you bother using the agent at all? If your effort in validating it is going to be that expensive, why bother, right? So it's extremely hard to get right. I'm not here trying to talk you out of it, but I'm saying the idea that any of these things are a thin wrapper or easy to build, you should really be questioning that. There's a world of difference between something that worked once, something that worked well enough to record one video, something that worked on a golden path with the exact right inputs, and something that you can actually put live to people and say, deploy that in front of your customers. Like, the gap between these things can be years, or it can be literally uncrossable. It's just a very hard challenge. So going from it works some of the time or most of the time to it's reliable, sometimes, and you'll find a lot of companies there, arguably you could say Apple are here with this whole Apple Intelligence thing. They pitched us all this big vision, and now they actually just can't see it through. It's a very big challenge, genuinely. Just to go back to the Apple thing for a second, you can have an amazing product idea, and you can make some great progress really quickly and feel great. And then you could say, oh, well, clearly on our rate of progress, we're going to have this thing live in like 6 months. So you go and you turn that thing into a landing page, and you say, it's coming, and you go and raise money. And at some point, your progress stalls, and then you have this huge marketing overhang where you've promised one thing, but in practice, you actually haven't delivered the other. So I'll finish in just 2 quick points. One, agent architecture. The choice you have to make here is really just, it's about models. It's about like, what model do you want to use, what instructions do you want, and what tools do you give it. And when you think about like your options here, you can be simple, which oftentimes means you're going to be easy to copy, or you can be complicated and multi-agent, et cetera, which oftentimes means it's going to take a long time to build, but it will have some advantages. And lastly, just launching your product is only the beginning. Once your agent is live, you have to tell your users, is it good? We've built a whole heap of product just to show customers, here's where it's working, here's where it's broken, et cetera. We've had to build all sorts of analytics that lets you interrogate the agent, et cetera. All sorts of metrics so that tell you, here's how to understand if your agent's working. We've had to teach them, here's what your workforce looks like when an agent is doing 70% of your customer support. That's a whole different product all of a sudden. And then you have to explain all this to the world. You have to explain, like, here's what it looks like to be an AI customer support team as opposed to a customer support team. So anyway, that was all I really wanted to cover. If you're building an agent, I would say be ambitious, respect the job you're copying, scope to something you can build workflows around it, and make sure you explain what your customers have to go through. If you're buying or evaluating, just make sure that the company you're buying off has done their homework, is the shortest thing I could say. This has to happen across your whole company, by the way. This is my last slide. You have to change how you design and build software. You have to change what your product is. You have to change how you price it, who you sell to, what you sell. You have to think about the core metrics you offer. The expectations around your entire product are totally different. It's a wild time. This is kind of one of the craziest times. I've been in software. I've been selling software for 20 years. And I swear to God, I've never had a wilder time trying to build a business. We're at hundreds of millions of revenue. Fin's in tens of millions of revenue. Our agent, it's growing 5x or 4x year over year. But it's the scariest, weirdest, freakiest time I've ever been in software. It is a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it all too. Thanks very much. I've been Des.